Censorship will first come for what you hate and what you despise, what you wish to be rid of from the world. But then it comes for what you love, because you didn't use your own principles to defend it. Censorship is swiftly becoming everyone's answer, whether it's a corporation or our own governments. I, for one, do not believe that censorship ever is used in a benevolent way for us, for the common folk, for the people. I believe that whoever wants the censorship will play on people's own moral values and then use it to further their own power. And the three biggest areas I see this in is art, pornography, and information. One of the most censored parts of art is definitely video games. Video games have always been the center of a controversy, whether it is the Columbine massacre or whether it is the latest rape day. There has always been a discussion about what the public should and should not be allowed to consume. One only has to look at Prince Harry's latest comments about Fortnite, asking that it be banned because it's an addiction. But let me ask you, would we say this thing about someone who frequents Netflix, someone who frequents going to the cinema, someone who frequents an art gallery, or even someone who frequents reading? We would not. The interactivity and the fact that it is behind a screen is something that draws ire to many people, and something that, for a lot of politicians and concerned parents, is a reason for them to declare that it needs to be censored. And with this interactivity, we can see things like Doom being blamed for the Columbine massacre, when in actuality Doom contained a lot of satanic imagery, and this came about at the same time as the Satanic Panic, in which anything that was anti-Christian was frowned upon and deemed not worthy of the American public interest. It just happened that these two events coincided. Another example would be Steam's removal of Rape Day. This is less a government and now a corporation, in which Steam had removed Rape Day after plenty of people were coming at them saying that this game was degenerate, horrible, and disgusting, and therefore it needed to be removed, playing to their own moral sensibilities without recognizing the fact that the game contained no illegal content. Now Steam has been removing dating sims for quite a while and has yet to really crack down on yaoi games. Yaoi games do break a lot of their terms of service, yet nothing is done. Doom, despite having something horrible directly tied to it, has flourished. It has become one of the most beloved video game series and is quite frankly rather enjoyable. I'm not saying the same could happen for Rape Day, and quite frankly I think the market for Rape Day is extremely niche, a fraction of a fraction. Yet nothing has been linked to Rape Day. There has been no proof of harm, only uncomfortable subject matter. What is the next step? Is a game in which a character you don't control who commits a violent act of rape, would that be banned? The gateway is opened for that to be a possibility, and slowly but surely it will erode until only the safest video games that are in the moral consciousness are allowed. There will be no pushing of boundaries. There will be no exploration of art. All because of a little interactivity and some moral busybodying. Speaking of moral busybodying, pornography in the UK is an extremely taboo subject. A lot of people don't like to talk about it, and a lot less people like to defend it. I, however, am definitely willing to die on this hill. I think that pornography, when it comes to live action, depicting two consenting adults doing whatever act they please, should be made for public consumption. Now, a lot of people will say, well, what about the children? And to them I say, keep an eye on them. It should be your responsibility as an adult to make sure that a child doesn't get on there, not the government's. We do not need the government to toy around with laws that would make us have to put in our passport details to a website in order to watch porn, or to go to a newsagent to buy a license. It's ridiculous. That is not a standard we should have. As a product, porn should be available to us to consume at our leisure. Accessibility to porn is one aspect that people are not able to. The distribution of pornography and the accessibility to it is only one part where the UK seems to be odd, however. Ever since the 60s and 70s, the UK has been known to not allow certain acts in it. And this carries on to this day. In fact, in 2014, they released a list of actions that people are not allowed to perform. I'm going to read this list to you, and I want you to really think about all of these actions and try and come to your own conclusion as to why these could be banned. Spanking, caning, aggressive whipping, penetration by any object associated with violence, physical or verbal abuse regardless of if consensual, urolagnia, known as water sports, role-playing as non-adults, physical restraint, humiliation, female ejaculation, strangulation, face-sitting, and fisting. Most people would look at this list and see that all of these acts are harmless. However, two really draw my eye. The first one being physical or verbal abuse regardless of if consensual, and the second one being role-playing as non-adults. Physical or verbal abuse regardless of if consensual is a rather disturbing thing to ban. It's simply words, or perhaps spanking or hair pulling or something of that sort, where even if you say that you want it, that it is okay, you're not allowed to view it. Because the government has decided arbitrarily that it is not something that you are allowed to consume, that you are not allowed to see. And even if everyone is saying that it is okay for you to see these acts, if they're saying it in the film, if it's advertised as something that has a lot of spanking, and that could be physical abuse. You could even have the actors or actresses at the start saying that they wanted it all, but it does not matter, because they have used their morality to decide that you do not get it. The second being role-playing as non-adults. It's odd to me that they would choose this. It seems to be conflating child pornography with two adults in a consenting environment where one or possibly two decide to act younger than they actually are. What is the issue when we know that they have to be adults? If they have to be adults in order to star in these films, then surely them acting however they please in a sexually fetishistic manner should be fine. If someone likes the idea of an adult acting as a child, that should be for them and for the niche market that has decided to consume this product. However, they are saying that it is something you are not allowed to see. But there is no actual harm being done to anyone in this, even through the other standards. It is simply how people act. to talk about pornography, you can also bring in art, and this is where I'm going to get very controversial to people. When it comes to depictions of art that aren't real, so something that is made with either a drawing, a 3D model, or anything of that sort of nature, I feel it should be permitted. I feel it should be allowed. So, for example, lolicon and shouty hentai. For those of you who don't know, and quite frankly, I do not like talking about this, but I feel that I must. It is art depicting minors in sexual situations. Now, why do I think that it is something that should be allowed? Because there's no harm being done in having it. You cannot physically harm someone with that depiction. The reason that disgusting things like pedophilia, child pornography, and bestiality are not allowed is because it is actively causing harm. And there is no consent in that situation. You do not need consent for a cartoon, for a 3D model. As I have said, it is not something I particularly like, and I have to defend this through gritted teeth. However, I cannot sit here and defend the existence of Rape Day, which would be illegal if it happened in real life, and not defend that form of pornography. Whether it is two adults who are consenting to whatever actions may occur when the camera rolls, or whether it is any form of cartoon, illustration, depiction that does not involve any real-life actors. Nobody is hurt from this. Which brings me to my final point. Information. Information is very, very heavily regulated. Whether it is through the news media, whether it is through someone saying that you cannot view something, or whether it is through a government oppressing you. The biggest example of this I can find is New Zealand, in which an 18-year-old boy has been sent to prison for 14 years for sharing the live stream of what the Christchurch shooter did. I feel that that information should be allowed for the public to consume. Any sort of violent act in that way that has been very widely covered in the news. We should be allowed to see and understand the barbarity behind it, and to not allow people to even share this and punishing them so heavily to ruin this man's young adult life because you don't like what he is sharing is quite frankly terrifying. This is going to talk a lot about New Zealand and Christchurch, as it is frankly the most egregious example of all of this. New Zealand will not even let you share the shooter's manifesto. For a while you had no way to get it in that country, and even Australia would crack down on people trying to share this information. That was until New Zealand decided to sell it to special interest groups. You have to pay the government for this vital information as to why this man did what he did. Would it not be better for people to see these problems, see what this man is talking about, and come to their own conclusions, think for themselves, why did he do this, instead of just blanket saying that nobody is allowed to have access to this? Websites such as Facebook and Twitter will also ban you if you try and bring up statistics, uncomfortable points that will not be racist in themselves, because that is the main crux of it all. When it comes to information, racism, sexism, and transphobia are the scapegoats that will be used. But they will hardly ever be addressed. If you try and bring up these points, they will simply declare you a racist and ban you. Case in point being Tommy Robinson, an activist in Britain who for years has been trying to bring up points about Islam and Muslim grooming gangs. People know this is a problem. There have been decades of grooming gang cover-ups that were not made widely known, and when people tried to bring it up, they would simply be shut down. Now these same people will have a knock on their door from the police to tell them that they have to check their thinking. The censorship of information only buries issues and leads to more and more violence, to people ramming their vans into shops, to people taking violent actions into their own hands because our governments say we are not allowed to see it. But why? What benefit do they have from not addressing these issues? For New Zealand, it seemed to cynically be for monetization, to simply sell the manifesto and then declare anyone who tries to share information to the public as an enemy, as someone to be disgusted and arrested. For Britain, it seemed to be to cover their own asses. We all know about Jimmy Savile, a man who was infamous for molesting children, and the BBC covered it up for decades. The mayor of Rotherham, which is the biggest place for grooming gangs, the biggest case bust, was sent to court for sexually harassing a minor. I can't simply say that it is all one big conspiracy, but what I can say is that the lines are there, that people are trying to get access to this information, but we're not being allowed it. We're being told that it is illegal and that it is wrong, and that we should trust the government to censor any of these bad thoughts away from us. But really it causes more divides. And before we know it, people will be so thirsty for information they will go to the deepest, darkest, dankest depths. And that is when more violence will come. But it all starts, every last bit of it starts, with something you hate. Whether it is a game that depicts rape, whether it is a certain sex act, whether it is someone being racist on the internet. It always starts with what you hate, and then it will come for something you need and something you love.